I knew that the bad things and disappointments were going to happen in order for the good and great things to happen. Melanie Gilbert begged Michael Landon to change the little house on the prairie plots. But America wanted love, so she had to give it to them. She had never been kissed before she was 15. He knew it was wrong when he was 23. Still, they shot scene after scene while 100 team members watched. Mum got up. There was crying in the dark. People were angry and wrote letters. Both stars are now finally saying what everyone thought but wouldn't say. The real story behind their friendship on screen is much worse than anyone thought. Melissa Gilbert began her life with a broken heart before she even had a name. She was born in Los Angeles on May 8, 1964. Kathy Wood and David Darlington, who were her real parents, were getting married and already had 3 kids between them from previous marriages. They gave her up for adoption just one day after she was born. They said they couldn't pay for a 7th child. Melanie never stayed the night with them. Paul Gilbert, an actor and comic, and his wife Barbara Crane, a dancer and actress, took her in right away. That moment of being alone with him will always be with her. After many years, she wrote in her book Prairie Tale, "A big part of my life has been an illusion. Paul Gilbert was more than a dad. He was everything to her. But on February 13, 1976, that world fell apart. Melissa learned that her dad had died of a stroke when she was only 11 years old. It made sense. He had been through one before, but the truth hurt a lot more. Paul Gilbert had killed himself. No one told her for decades. During World War II, he flew attack planes, who had injuries that hurt him so much they were unbearable all the time. Even though the Veterans Administration was taking care of him, they couldn't help him. When Melissa, 44 years old, found out the truth, it broke her heart. She told Oprah that for weeks she had been barely able to do anything. She hired a private detective in the end to find out what really happened. She wanted to know. She had to figure out why the person who had kept her from being unwanted was now gone. And no one was telling her the truth. Melissa was adopted, but she was born into the show business. Barbara Crane, her adoptive mother, was the daughter of Harry Crane, who made The Honeymooners and came up with the idea of star roasts for the Dean Martin show. He had written for the Golden Globes, the Oscars, and even the Emmys. He was a big deal in the early days of TV, and that made the world Melissa would grow up in what it is today. Barbara also worked in the theatre business. That meant Melissa grew up in a home where TV, scripts, and red carpets were easy to get to. They were a normal part of her life. That Hollywood vibe went through the whole family. They had another child, Jonathan Gilbert, who they adopted in 1967. After a few years, in 1975, Barbara had a daughter named Sarah with her new husband, the lawyer Harold Abelis. In the end, Melissa, Jonathan, and Sarah were all big stars on TV. Melissa didn't become famous by accident. She worked for it. She was already in ads before she turned 5. One of her most well-known roles was in an Alpo dog food ad with Lorne Greene in 1977. Greene and Gilbert got along great, and in the ad, she was talking about how proud she was that her dog, Fluffy, had won a blue ribbon. Melissa Gilbert walked into a room full of more than 500 hopeful girls when she was 9 years old. She left with a part that would define her for the rest of her life. In early 1973, NBC was looking all over the country for the right kid to play Laura Ingalls in a new pilot. Something happened when Melissa walked in and started her screen test with Michael Landon. She wasn't the only person he saw. He saw his daughter on the screen. He later said that her show was like magic. She was not pretending. Her name was Laura. Her life would never be the same again after that night at the Burbank studios. What's funny? She didn't know who Landon was. He was famous for 14 years on Bonanza, but she had never seen it. So she didn't act nervous or try to impress him with praise when she tried out. She only acted it out. All of that honesty and lack of style. What Landon had been looking for was right there. She didn't think of him as famous. She thought of him as Pa. For the next 9 years, that simple link would be at the center of Little House on the Prairie. It felt like Melissa was in a TV show when she found out she got the part. Leslie Landon, one of her classmates, walked up to her with a big smile one day. Leslie, Michael Landon's real daughter, told her, "My dad picked you." There was no phone call or studio announcement. It was just 2 girls in the hallway of the school. After many years, those two girls would be back on set. In the last few seasons of the show, Leslie played schoolteacher Etta Plum. She shot the pilot in the beautiful hills of California in the summer of 1973. It aired in March of the next year, and more than 17 million people watched it. That was really big. But even after that, she had to wait almost a year to find out if the show would stay on for a full season. That kind of waiting takes a long time for kids. But shooting started up again in June 1974, and Little House on the Prairie was born. True. The show ran until 1983 and was about family, struggle, and life on the frontier. One moment decided her fate. She had to act out a scene where Laura says goodbye to her dog at her last tryout. Real hard, real tears, painful. Landon paid close attention, and by the end, his eyes were filled with tears. He was moved, which is something not many adult actors could do, let alone a kid. It was not practice. The method wasn't right. It was honest and raw from the heart. He knew that day that she wasn't just pretending to be Laura Ingalls, she was herself. From 10 to 19 years old, Melissa wasn't just pretending to be someone else. She grew up in front of the whole country. More than 20 million people watched each episode of the show at its peak. Every week she was in the living room of America. Millions of people watched on TV as she lost her baby teeth, got bigger, and went through puberty. That long, no child had ever been watched so closely in history. It wasn't just a show, it happened all over the country, one story at a time. While most kids rode their bikes or did their chores, Melissa was getting her camera ready for dawn and learning lines. But there was still school. Learn it right there on the set instead of going to a regular school. To follow the rules set by the state, tutors would jump in between takes and teach quickly and effectively. It wasn't simple, but it worked. The other child players and she were close. They were kids who lived in two worlds at once, as students and as stars. Melissa made time for parts that showed she wasn't just a one-show wonder, even though she had a lot going on. She played Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker in 1979, when she was only 15 years old. It was powerful and moving, and it got her nominated for an Emmy. In another dramatic part the next year, she played Anne Frank. Once more, another nominee. It wasn't just cute kid parts. She played some of the toughest young roles on TV, and she did a great job with all of them while she was still filming Little House. Melissa's story is crazy, but not because of her fame or awards. It's crazy because of how much she became Laura Ingalls. The person did more than just show up on TV. Melanie took on some of Laura's beliefs, battles, and strength. She said that working at Little House wasn't just a job. It was her youth, her family, and everything she knew. As the show came to a close, it was hard to tell who she was and who she played. The person helped her grow up. This season of Little House on the Prairie, Dean Butler played Almanzo Wilder. He was 23 years old at the time. Melissa Gilbert was only 15 years old when she played Laura Ingalls. Now, 8 years might not seem like a big difference, but in 1979, it felt like a huge gap. Dean even said it was like the Grand Canyon for age gaps. For a show that ran during family hour and was known for telling clean stories, this pairing made people, including those in the cast, look twice. Ooh. The girl was still in high school. Dean wasn't in college anymore. Still, they were supposed to play lovers, have romantic scenes, and be emotionally close. People all over the world can see their first kiss on TV. The creators made that choice, which caused tension and discomfort that never really went away. She didn't try to hide how she felt. She was filled with feeling when she first heard Dean was cast. She said it was a perfect storm of sadness, fear, anger, and sickness. She had imagined acting with someone about the same age as her, someone who knew what it was like to be a kid. They instead brought in a man with beard, a guy she would know to kiss. That wasn't just acting though, it became real. Laura's first kiss happens in the episode called Sweet 16. Lisa did the same thing. It wasn't just her first kiss on camera. She had never kissed before. There were no dates, experiences, or other things that could have helped her get ready for it. Just a film group. Lots of lights and almost 100 people looked at the cameras as they rolled. Dean Butler knew it wasn't right. He later said he was really scared. He said she was only a little girl. It was tough. He knew that this kind of casting would never work in Hollywood today. It would be turned down right away. But it did happen back then. It was one of the most talked about parts of the show's history. What went on behind the scenes made it even harder. Barbara Abeles, Melissa's mother, stood behind the cameras and watched. Barbara began to cry as her daughter leant in to kiss her. This wasn't a happy moment. It hurt a lot. The little girl she was taking care of was growing up on a set with an adult man in front of everyone. Dean had a clear memory of it. In his autobiography, Prairie Man, he wrote that Barbara had never liked the idea of him being hired. When they kissed, she went from not liking it to being very sad. He said she couldn't stand seeing me kiss her daughter. Melissa, on the other hand, did everything she could to avoid it. Michael Landon, who made the show, was begged to change scenes. "Isn't a hug enough?" she would ask, wanting to stay in her safety zone very much. But the stories didn't stop. Scene after scene, kiss after kiss. She had to play the part every time, even when she was sick, after never having felt love in real life or scared, and people could tell. A few people loved the romance. Some people were shocked. One mother wrote to a newspaper and said the casting director should be burned at the stake for putting together a teenage girl and an adult guy. Dean Butler also got mail. Some fans said it made them feel bad to watch those scenes. They were right, too. In 1979, an article said that it would be the hardest part of the season. Not because of the lines, but because of how things really are. Dean Butler might have the hardest part of the 1979 ad TV season. In other words, he has to show people that it's okay for an adult man to love a teenage girl. Even though there was criticism, the show was a huge hit. It was the most watched show on Nielsen, and it was shown twice during prime time that summer. It became well known. After many years, TV Land would even give them a prize for the most memorable kiss in the history of TV. But how much did it cost? A girl who was 15 years old was made to feel like an adult, a mother who was left to cry in the dark, an actor who was very uncomfortable, and an industry that put numbers above all else at the time. Dean said afterwards, "Today you just couldn't do it." He's right. Things have changed. The rules have changed. The way Hollywood treats young artists has also changed, which is a good thing. That change came too late for Melissa Gilbert, though. Her youth was shaped by a story she didn't write. From the TV show, Melissa Gilbert's life looked great. Behind the scenes, though, things were going badly. Melissa was slowly becoming addicted to drugs while millions of people watched her as Laura Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie. In her teens, it began and quickly got worse. It was 2 full bottles of wine every night by the time she was an adult. That wasn't just drinking for fun. She was trying to stay alive, and it almost killed her. She passed out and fell asleep in her dog's bed one night while she had guests over for dinner. That's when she knew she had to change how she was living. But she didn't just drink to escape. Besides that, she used drugs. She felt alone because of her fame, and the stress of being a kid star never went away. For a while, the drugs made her forget about everything, but the damage was done all over her life. Her relationships got worse. Her parenting got worse. In the end, her own son begged her to stop drinking, which broke her heart. It hurt her more than anything else had before. It was the alarm she couldn't turn off. She joined Alcoholics Help the next day. The 12-step program saved her life. As she listened to other people tell their worst stories in those meetings, she finally felt less alone. It was in her 2009 book Prairie Tale that she let down her guard and told the truth about her addictions, failed relationships, and the emotional damage her youth in the spotlight caused. But that wasn't the end of the pain. Melissa tried out for a part in Oliver Stone's movie The Doors in the early 1990s. For years, she couldn't forget what happened next. Gilbert said that Stone wanted to get even. She had said bad things about him in public before. Now, he set her up at the interview, métier. She was given a scene that he said he had written just for her. It wasn't a real event. It was a trick. The lines were very clear. She had to say the words again while on her knees. "Honey, do me." She felt ashamed. She was crying and looked at her coldly and said, "Good, it will be better after that." Unknown to her, the casting director left, leaving her alone with Stone, another character. She cried and ran out. She still thinks that the whole thing was planned as a punishment. Stone later said it wasn't true, but Gilbert never changed his mind. After that, she got married to Bao Brinkman. At first glance, it looked like a Hollywood romance, but 6 weeks after meeting, they were engaged and on their way to a terrible relationship. He hurt her feelings, drank too much, and cheated on her all the time. Their marriage, which lasted 6 years, slowly fell apart. Not only did Brinkman steal, he did it without feeling bad about it. One of the worst betrayals was when he was said to have slept with Melissa's former Little House co-star Shannon Doherty. Doherty used to look up to her and treat her like a big sister. Now, she was a part of her broken heart. She was only 19 years old at the time. Brinkman was about 40 years old. Melissa didn't think twice when asked what she'd say to Doherty again after all these years.